I used to see out a lot, and it just bothered me, the bravado that he had. Nothing was bothering him in the world, and I'm like, he doesn't know it, but I'm going to wreck that. But to your point, I like to mix things up and try things different. I went out and knocked on his door. I told him flat out, hey, I'm here because I know what you do. This is your opportunity before things go sideways for you to really help yourself out and come to Jesus, so to speak. He kept telling me, I don't know what you're talking about. I said, Rod, this is your time because I'm going to get you. I had a decent case on him. I did not have enough to indict or arrest at that time, but I was looking for a CS in this organization. But that judgment day always comes. A couple weeks later, I got a call from our office in Indianapolis saying, hey, do you know Rod so-and-so? They're like, well, he's here right now. We popped him with 250 pounds of weed. And I'm like, cool.
Hey guys, welcome back to part 2 of this week's episode with Randy Wagner. Thank you guys so much for coming back. We kind of left you hanging yesterday where Randy and his wife had just transferred to Santa Rosa, California out of Honolulu, where it was a really tough assignment. But, thank you for taking one for the team there, Randy.
Of course.
But we left you hanging because I want you to come back today and hear the rest of the story, right? So, and that's what we're going to get into now, the rest of Randy's career, not only with DEA, but what he got into afterwards. So as we spoke yesterday, Randy, you guys had just transferred out of Honolulu. You're in Santa Rosa. You're now the resident agent in charge, which for those of you out there that are not familiar with that, that's a first line supervisor within DEA. We have a group supervisor and we have a resident agent in charge. And the difference is they're the same rank. It's just that a RAC, or the resident agent in charge, is in an office away from the division office. So he's the senior agent in that office. There's not an assistant special agent in charge, which would be the next step up. Okay. So that's we live in acronyms in the government. So now you're a RAC, right?
Yep. And I went from beautiful Honolulu to beautiful wine country, And for those of you that are not familiar with the geography of Santa Rosa, we're about 80 miles north of San Francisco and right at the lip of wine country in Sonoma County. And then to the east of us, we have Napa County. But when I first took that position, I was talking to a lot of the folks that were working up here, and a lot of things were marijuana cultivation and, we're just south of the Emerald Triangle to the north where, the most abundant marijuana cultivation takes place in Humboldt County and Mendocino County and so forth. And so when I got here, a lot of the guys were still working marijuana cases and so forth, but weren't getting a lot of federal prosecutions. Go figure, right? We're in the Northern District of California, right?
Surprise.
Exactly. Surprise, surprise. Even Gomer Pyle can figure that one out. But I'm like, guys, let's see what else is out there. Let's get these CSs rounded up. Let's not focus so much on marijuana cases, and let's see what else is out there. And when I got to that office, when I came to Santa Rosa, Steve, there was one OCDF case. And then it was in the process of being, judicially closed and so forth. So I went through all the case files, and some of the guys had some meth cases, some cocaine cases, and an LSD case. And I started looking through the case files. I'm like, guys, we got good stuff here. Let's work these up and try to make them, OCDF cases. And we were able to do that. I brought the U.S. Attorney's Office up to sit with us at our office in Santa Rosa. And, I encourage those of you in law enforcement to do this, whether it be at the federal level or the state and local level, but bring in your prosecuting team, make them feel like they're part of the team as well. And if you talk to them about your cases from the get-go, they're going to feel a part of the team. They're going to feel more motivated to get that case, prosecuted. So I brought the U.S. Attorney's Office in and hey, here's what we're working on, and we want to maybe make this OCDF and so forth. And they liked all those ideas. And, after a year of me being up here with a great group of guys that, I think they were just in previous supervisors maybe were lacking the vision to get out of the marijuana world, but these guys bought in from day one and just great investigators and followed my lead. And we had 6 OCDF cases within the first year and a half.
Wow. And what's your manpower situation there?
Oh, at that time, Steve, it was 4 DEA agents and 6 local task forces. One from Humboldt County. We had a task force officer assigned. His jurisdiction was 4 hours away.
Oh, Jesus.
And he wanted to come down, which was great. He came down 1 day a week, and that way he can get to know the guys, work on all his DEA paperwork and stuff. Well, and then the other 3 or 4 days he was up in Humboldt County working on the investigations that we were working with Humboldt County and their drug task force up there as well. We had BLM, not Black Lives Matter, but Bureau of Land Management, TFO. We had a U.S. Forest Service TFO and some other local jurisdiction TFOs, and we were about 10 or 11 strong. But as you know, when you have an OCDF case, the biggest selling point for overtime for these local jurisdictions that may not be able to help you on these cases, if you show them it's an OCDF case, hey, Sheriff Lindsay, I can deputize three more of your people, and we can pay for all their overtime. So you got a whole area of responsibility that are buying into the cases that you're making, And like I said, one of them was an LSD case. One of them was a heroin case. We started seeing heroin come up in the Northern California region for the first time. As you know, Steve, DEA started hitting a lot of the doctors and pharmaceutical companies and so forth. So, the oxy market was drying up a little bit. So folks were going back to heroin. And one of our OCDF cases that we were up on a Title III on, we netted 30 pounds of heroin that was located within tires.
Wow.
Within the wheel wells. And 30 pounds of heroin doesn't seem like a big deal, but at that time, and I could be wrong, to this date, I think it's the largest heroin seizure north of the Golden Gate Bridge. So
was that Mexican heroin or Asian
Mexican heroin? Yeah, yep, Mexican heroin, black tar.
Black tar.
Yeah, and and heroin, sort of fell by the wayside with the emergence of fentanyl now and so forth. But we really did a good job up in Santa Rosa with, it was polydrug cases. And I can't stress enough bringing those prosecutors on board. I remember in El Paso, we had an AUSA who would put a DEA raid jacket on and come in after we cleared the house.
Cool.
And one of the biggest cases, a marijuana cultivation case we did, an OCDF case we did on the island of Kauai, that helicopter salesman, it sold my wife to become a police officer. So we took the federal AUSA up in the helicopter and showed him the 8,000 marijuana plant patch that he was going to be prosecuting. And, when you bring those people in that are maybe outside of your purview as far as law enforcement goes, when you bring other people in and make them part of the team, the sky's the limit, because you're going to get all the resources, manpower, everything you can ask for, with everybody working together to get these cases going. And I think that was the success that we had in Santa Rosa. I was able to sit down in that rack position, getting out there and meeting with the local chiefs and local sheriffs and like, hey, what are your problems? And here's how you can help us help you and so forth. And it was great. I was turning people down. We didn't have enough TFO spots because,
Right.
You're only allowed a certain amount in each field division. But we're very robust with TFO spots. And, a lot of times, when it comes to doing drug enforcement, I mean, what better people to have in your team are the state and locals that are out there that know the bad guys better than we do sometimes, or know what kind of cars they drive, or maybe they went to high school with them.
Absolutely.
And can give you smaller, some idiosyncrasies and some secrets that they knew about these people, back in high school and or college,
Yeah. And that's,
So I think-
that's the thing with DEA. We transfer around not everybody, but the ones of us that do transfer around, you come into these areas, you don't know who the good guys are and the bad guys are. So that's your state and locals are the most valuable asset you could have out there.
No doubt. And like you just said, with everybody, with us moving around all the time and so forth, you're starting from scratch, which isn't a bad thing either. But yeah, you better have some TFOs assigned to your task forces if you're going to be successful.
Just a little side note here. My wife and I with DEA, we transferred, 7, 8 times over 26 years. And, every 3 to 4 years, you're picking up and moving somewhere. Now, we've been in Orlando for 4 years now, and she's got the itch to move. It's like becoming a gypsy or something.
Well, I mean, it's funny because you sort of programmed her, right?
Yeah.
And, I think that was one of the attractions, and I'm sure it was for you too, the fact that DEA were willing to move you around
Mm-hmm.
when you came on board. And unfortunately though too, I worked with a lot of folks in Atlanta PD that were just great investigators, great cops, but to your point, Steve, they didn't want to move.
Right.
They were homers, so to speak, or they went to Florida State and they settled down in Atlanta, and they just didn't want that opportunity, or not an opportunity to move around so much. And but I think that's why our organization is very successful, because we're constantly evolving. The cases that I did in El Paso and Honolulu, and then what I managed in Santa Rosa, they're all completely different. And I think that is what really keeps us young and keeps us motivated to keep, knocking these doors down, so to speak.
It is. And it as you're coming up, especially as a young agent, you're building your confidence to where as you become a senior agent, something has never been tried before. Hey, as long as it's legal, let's try it, see what happens.
Exactly. I got a funny story for you. To that point, being in El Paso, I had a target, and I would see this target out. I was in El Paso, and I told you I was single when I first got to El Paso,
right.
And so I was, when in Rome, I'm going to the nightclubs, I'm going to the bars, and not only to have a good time, but I'm paying attention to what's going on around me and so forth. And I would see several targets out that I was investigating myself. And one of them I used to see out a lot, and it just bothered me, the bravado that he had. And, nothing was bothering him in the world. And I'm like, he doesn't know it, but I'm going to wreck that. I'm going to wreck that bravado as soon as I get that arrest on him. And, I tried something that I was told, I don't know if you should do that, Wagner. I don't know if you should do that. But to your point, I like to mix things up and try things different. And I would encourage people to do this. I went out and knocked on this guy's door.
Yeah.
I knocked on his door, Steve, and he let me in. I showed him my badge, and I told him my name and so forth. And I told him flat out, hey, I'm here because I know what you do. And this is your opportunity before things go sideways for you to really help yourself out and, come to Jesus, so to speak. And he kept telling me, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about. And I told him, I said, Rod, this is your time because I'm going to get you. Okay. Yeah. And I had a decent case on him. I did not have enough to indict or arrest at that time, but I was looking for a CS in this organization. And, that judgment day always comes. A couple weeks later, I got a call from our office in Indianapolis saying, hey, do you know Rod so-and-so? And I said, yeah, why? They're like, well, he's here right now. We popped him with 250 pounds of weed. And I'm like, cool, let him know. Cause I guess they ran it through Natus and found out, I was working the case. And right. I said, tell him that his good buddy from El Paso is going to catch a flight early next week, and I'll be up to talk to him as well. So I get up there, and obviously, he's spilling his guts and telling me about everybody that I'd found on the pen registers and so forth. But he goes, a funny story, Agent Wagner? I go, no, what? He goes, when you were talking to me in the foyer of my apartment, I had 100 pounds of weed that were in that closet that you were standing next to, completely heat sealed and everything. And I'm going, are you kidding me? He goes, no. And, but, life is full of these little funny stories and so
Yeah.
forth. And, I did. I took a chance. What did I have to lose? Absolutely nothing. I wanted to go talk to him and see if I could flip him. And, he didn't want to flip and he didn't want to talk to me, and that's fine. But ultimately, if you stay the course, we're always going to get our bad guy in the end.
Yep, absolutely. And I miss DEA so much. It's you talk to some of the guys that are still on the job, like the SAC for DEA in Atlanta is Rob Murphy, who's a really close friend of mine. And I talk to him, and we talk every couple of months, and I'll say what's going on there, and he'll tell me about a case or two, and you get that fire in your belly, or younger guys that that are still. I don't know that there's anybody still in the job that I knew, hardly, but they tell you about cases, and you start going, well, did you do this? Do you do that? Have you checked this database? And they're like, hey, old man, we got this.
But yeah, that's so true, and I've learned this, and I know you know this saying. It's so cliche, but it's so true. People don't know what they don't know.
Right.
And just because Steve Murphy or Randy Wagner sees something, they may not see it. And I have a hard time with that sometimes because, to your point, it's like, wow, you want to get back out there. And it's like, wow, what could I have done if I was still working this case and so forth? And I think that's why I'm passionate now about, teaching this generation and even some of these older guys about, hey, these are some things that I tried back in the day. They may not be successful for you, but if you don't try them, you're never going to know. And,
exactly.
when I teach about cultivating confidential sources, I use, I'm not a big baseball guy. You already know I'm a football guy, but, and I tell them, you have to be careful when you say this too, but I tell them, imagine you're in high school and college, all right? And every guy wants to say they never struck out or anything like that. And it's just like asking a girl out on a date, or if you can buy them a drink, you're going to get turned down. But when you go out and you take the initiative to go talk to these small airport managers, who, by the way, Steve, have security clearances, right?
Yeah.
They're not nefarious people. They have security clearances. What better people to talk to? But when you talk to the rental car companies and you talk to the people outside of law enforcement, it's like, get off your tail and go talk to them. If you talk to 10, and only 3 of them talk to you, hey, you're batting 300. That's Hall of Fame in baseball, batting 300, And even if you only got 1, well, maybe you get that airport manager that I talked to in Santa Teresa, New Mexico, So I just think there's plenty of opportunities out there for us to get that information. And again, we don't know what we don't know. And maybe they didn't experience the things that you and I have experienced and others have experienced, but it's up to us to bring those experiences to light and so forth.
Right. Now, so your wife she's with the sheriff's office there?
She's with the Santa Rosa Police Department here. Yeah.
Okay. And what's next up in your career there? How long were you the RAC there before your next step?
So I was a RAC for here for 4 years, from 2011 to 2015. Mm-hmm. And then, as you know, Steve, you get that call for headquarters, right? Yep. And so my wife was still, she was a police officer currently in Santa Rosa at the time in 2015 when I got that call to headquarters. And luckily, I was able to get a Office of Professional Responsibility spot, OPR, aka DEA's Internal Affairs, down in Los Angeles. And I know those are when you hear IA or you hear OPR, you hear negative things. But I'll be honest with you, Steve. I saved a lot of people that were being targeted for stupid stuff, and I actually saved some careers that way. And then, as you know, we always don't have the brightest tools in the shed. But you would have somebody come in and, tell them off the record, hey, just be honest. we know what you did. We all make mistakes. Take the hit, and hopefully things will work out. And they're like, okay, I understand all that. And then you turn that recorder on, and what do they start doing on the record? They start fibbing.
Yeah.
And it's like, sorry, I can't help you out anymore, and at least, regarding internal affairs and OPR, whatever department you work for, always just tell the truth, because a lot of times, when you don't tell the truth in situations like that, it's just going to make your career a hell of a lot more burdensome, because now you're going to get hit with, Brady, Giglio issues and all that other stuff. So, but yeah, I was able to stay in the state of California because my family was still up here. So we were separated. I lived in another crap hole, Redondo Beach, California, and did that hour and 15-minute drive to downtown Los Angeles. But great experience. Yeah. I don't know, Steve, I can't stay away from traffic. I just can't for some reason. And I like to, thank God they invented Bluetooth, because what I do now in my current position, I get on the phone and I make phone calls in Bluetooth. So that hour and 15-minute drive I have to San Francisco, at least I'm getting phone calls done. And at the end, I do the same thing. So, I was doing that, and there wasn't much hands-free. It wasn't so much hands-free when I was working in LA, but at least I was getting phone calls back and forth to work then. So I did that for a year.
When you were in Redondo Beach, did you ever eat at a place called Eat at Joe's?
I did not, but I'm familiar with what you're talking about. I am.
Yeah, that's I've still got the coffee mug from there somewhere.
Oh, really?
Probably right behind me here, but that was John Wayne's hangout.
Okay, yep, I remember that. And that's I'm not a fan of Los Angeles, but you talk about Manhattan Beach, Hermosa Beach, Redondo, beautiful beaches, and a great time as well.
So, just for our listeners, how far away is Redondo or LA from Santa Rosa?
Oh gosh, it's a haul. It's on a good day, an 8-hour drive. On a good day.
How often are you getting to see your family?
Yeah, so during that time, I was actually helping coach my son's youth football team. And luckily, I had a great ASAC at the time, Wade Shannon, who's told me, Randy, put in for an extension, and I'll make it work for you. So when I first reported, because I didn't want to keep that, going, but I reported to LAOPR, I want to say in late October of 2015, and my son's football team did really well. We were getting ready to go in the playoffs, and I was actually coaching the defense. And so in those first couple of weeks, I worked during the week, and then I flew back from LA to Santa Rosa. Luckily, they had a nonstop flight on Alaska, so I was able to come back for those last 3 playoff games, coaching them, and ultimately see us win the championship, which was great. And wow. And then after football season, I was down there, so my family would come down, every other weekend, or I would come back up every other weekend. And LA is LA, but you've got Disneyland, you've got Universal Studios, you got the beach, so they didn't mind coming down, and my wife and I have been separated by geography, but not in our marriage.
Right.
And she's been a foundation in our, she's the MVP of our family, period. She holds the glue together, and doing her job as well as she does her job, and she does a lot of stuff in the community as well. We just knew we had that foundation, and she didn't, she told me when we moved to Santa Rosa, like, I'm done doing lateral schools.
Yeah.
Whatever move you do, you're doing it by yourself. And I completely understood that,
Mm-hmm. And you guys have how many kids?
We have 2. A 28-year-old and a 20-year-old. He's still in college. The 20-year-old's still in college right now up in Worcester, Mass. And my 28-year-old is a geologist here, actually, in Santa Rosa, California.
Very cool. That's, it's not unusual that the spouse is also in law enforcement, but there are unsung heroes because, as a federal agent, if you're doing your job, you're gone a lot.
No doubt.
So we'd like to, and that's why we bring it out, that we like to recognize our unsung heroes here on the Game of Crimes. You weren't in OPR very long, though, were you?
No, just 1 year. And I met a lot of good people, and like I said, I saved some careers, and OPR is frustrating too. A lot of times you see people in our profession make these mistakes, and unfortunately, some of them are making the same mistakes over and over again. And I just don't know if that, what kind of issue is that? Are we not holding our people to the highest accountability standard, no matter what kind of line of law enforcement, whether it be state, local, or federal? And we had repeat offenders, and sometimes it was frustrating. You do your investigation, and we weren't decision makers or anything like that. We literally took the facts of the case and presented them to the board and the deciding official, and they would handle the case from there. But I don't want to say it was rewarding, but it opened my eyes a lot to a lot of different things that maybe cause people to make mistakes in our profession and so forth.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that do silly things. Everybody makes mistakes, and that
Exactly.
was my policy as a supervisor. Was always, if you make a mistake, own up to it. If it's illegal, now that's a completely different matter.
Exactly.
Right from wrong. But if you make an honest mistake, own up to it, learn from it, and just don't make the same mistake again, and we're good to go. But like you said, there's people just continue to do the same stupid thing over and over again.
Yeah, and I had an older brother, and he and I were very different growing up. We have 8 years separated between us, and I learned a lot from his mistakes, And as we got older, now it's like we're almost like very similar, like two peas in a pod. We have different personalities, but our interests and our likes are very similar. And I told him, I'm like, bro, I learned a lot from you of what not to do, And
yeah.
We grew up in a strict house, and my dad had no problem pulling a can of whip ass out on me or my brother,
Yep.
And I remember cursing my dad behind closed doors and everything, but when I became a father, I knew what he was doing, and I completely get that.
Yeah, my dad's been gone for quite some time, and when I see him in the next life, I've got a lot of apologizing to do.
No doubt. Same here.
So what was next in the adventure parade for Randy Wagner after OPR?
Well, I tell you what, it was awesome. After being at OPR for 1 year, I put in for the assistant regional director spot in Ankara, Turkey, for DEA's Middle East operations and our office out there. And
where did that come from?
You know what? It's funny. That's what a lot of people ask me. Where'd that come from? Steve, you served overseas, and God has a plan. Everything in life is timing, and that is cliche, but at least in my life, it couldn't be any truer.
Right.
That opportunity came up, and my wife and I always talked about going overseas at some point, and unfortunately, we talked about it, and she's like, well, if you get this, I'm not going with you. And she said this like I would expect my wife to tell me this. She said, promise me two things, that, you'll get us over there whenever you can, and come home. When you come home, don't mess up what I have going in the house. And I can give you a perfect example of that. I came home for the first time after I was in Turkey, and she was working a midnight shift. And I came home, and I left dishes in the sink. My flight got in, so she was at work when I got in. So I left dishes in the sink, and I left the toilet seat up, and I heard her come home from work, and I immediately got awoken to a kiss. And hey, this is my house now. You need to abide by my rules. So, lesson learned. I took all that in stride, but she was absolutely right. I was messing up what she had set up while I was gone, and rightfully so. But I do remember, she said, hey, we'll tackle everything if you get it. And, I was fortunate enough to get that position. And, she said that I know that you want this, and I don't want to be laying in bed with you when we're together in our 60s or 70s, and you wake up one night, regretting that you didn't take advantage of that opportunity.
Yep.
And she said what I think every soulmate should tell their spouse. So she said, "You do what you got to do, and we'll be here waiting for you when you get back."
Wow. That's, my wife told me the same thing. She's like, I don't want to be the one that in retirement you can say, if it wasn't for you, I would have whatever.
Exactly. And, we got those questions from people. Oh, hey, sorry to hear about you and your wife, or I can't believe you're. Yeah, seriously, Steve. Or I can't. Yeah, you heard them. Or I can't believe you're leaving your family behind. And then I'm like, you don't know anything about this situation.
Yeah.
And it turned out, once I got there, a year or two after I'd been there, people are calling me for marital advice now. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Didn't you say that I was effed up for going over there and leaving my family?
Yep.
And, I came back from Turkey. I was there for 2 years. I came back in 2019, and I came back to a very strong foundation that me and my wife had set up a long time ago, and nothing's changed, to the fact of, she did want me to get her over there as much as possible. And, she went to IDEC, International Drug Enforcement Conferences. She went to the one in The Hague, and the one in that we hosted in the Middle East, Azerbaijan, Baku, Azerbaijan. And I brought her out for a management meeting in Dubai and a meeting in Maldives shortly before I retired. And then I'll never forget taking her back to the airport. Once we came back from the Maldives in Dubai, we spent the last day or two there. She said, "Are you sure you want to retire? I like this." Because she was jet setting, and she was getting treated like royalty. As you know, when I was meeting with ambassadors and chiefs of police in these other countries, they were taking her and my family out sightseeing.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, they spoil them. And that was a great opportunity to go overseas after being here in the States. And, it worked out. And the thing that intrigued me about the Middle East was, if you open up a newspaper, although I don't even know if those exist anymore, but if you open up any news network or anything, you're always going to see something happening in that part of the world. And I really thought that would be cool to work in that kind of environment,
Who was your RD back then? I doubt I know him. But...
The RD was Kyle Williamson.
Oh, and then, I know Kyle very well. He worked for me when I was an ASAC at SO in Special Operations Division.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. That's right. Because he spent some time at SO.
He ended up being the SAC in El Paso.
El Paso, yep. So I got there in January of 2018, and then a couple months later, they moved him over to the SAC of El Paso.
He's doing well.
Yeah, he is. And then I was designated as the acting RD shortly after Kyle left. So I'd only been an ASAC for 4 months. So I went from, 6 DEA country offices, Istanbul, Ankara, to now Kabul, Afghanistan, New Delhi, India, and Moscow, Russia. So I was sort of thrown to the wolves, so to speak, but it was a great experience for me. You
had Riyadh also, right?
Yes, I did. Yep.
I mean, that's you read my mind, because I was going to ask you to tell everybody the countries that you were responsible for oversight of. It's not, I know in the past there's been agents that go to some of the overseas offices and they kind of go on the golf circuit or the sightseeing circuit, and they really don't do a job, which, makes DEA look bad and the criminals win when we're not doing our job. But I had the honor of attending a conference in Istanbul one time, and was hesitant to go because I, never been there, not sure what to expect. I was expecting to see camels and goats and sand everywhere. And you come into this modern city, and my oldest son had flown over to meet me there so we could spend a few extra days, and you get to see the Roman ruins. There's walls still that people are using that were built by the Romans back during their empire. there was it's all Muslim there, but we got to see the Blue Mosque, and these are things that you just, a little redneck hillbilly boy from the mountains of West Virginia. There's lots of times in your places around the world going, what the heck am I doing here? How did I get here?
Yeah, and you mentioned Istanbul. A lot of people, unfortunately, have that misconception before they go, and then they go and they're like, "Oh my gosh, what a great
Yeah.
city!"
Yeah.
And Istanbul, in my opinion, and I've seen a lot of places, and I know you have too. Istanbul, to me, is one of my favorite cities that I've ever, visited and been a part of. You said it, the Second Roman Empire,
Mm-hmm.
the uniqueness of it, and not only that, it literally divides Europe and Asia, right?
Right.
And you've got the Bosphorus River that divides the part of Europe and Asia, and that Bosphorus River goes right into the Black Sea, right?
Yep.
So, what countries are located on the Black Sea, right? Ukraine, Russia, Georgia. And I'll never forget, we were actually out on a boat on the Bosphorus River with my staff from the Istanbul office, and we were coming back in to Istanbul, and all of a sudden you see this submarine pop up.
Whoa.
Out of nowhere. Maybe we were like about 100 yards off or so, and I'm like, "Oh, cool! I didn't know the Turks had this kind of robust naval fleet." And they started laughing, and I got quickly reminded. They're like, "Randy, that's a Russian sub." I'm like, "Wow, how cool is that?"
Absolutely.
And you just talk about, you talk about the history of that place, and we talk about all the great people across the United States that we worked with. Man, the partners that we had overseas. To this day, and I was there during a time where we had some issues with dealing with the Turkish government. Erdogan is in power. He did not like the U.S. government. And unfortunately, we had a foreign service national that was incarcerated by their government that worked for us for years. It was not an amicable relationship between us and the Turkish police, but we found ways still to find the folks that wanted to work with us in the country of Turkey. And luckily, I had that purview as well as of all those other countries. And a lot of things. I could tell you this, Steve. My time over there, and this, the media here wants to report things that they want to report, not what's actually out there. But I got tired of hearing about, the Middle East. We have no partners out there. They hate us. They this. They that. That couldn't be the furthest thing from the truth. Everywhere I went, I got treated like royalty. Everywhere we went, we got treated like royalty. Everybody was like U.S., giving a thumbs up. And, but if you come back and you turn on the news here today, or you turn it on 2019 and 18 when I was there, you didn't see those stories.
Yeah.
They do. They want to be like us. And that's why I try to stress to people today in our profession, like, you think you have it bad? You're making $150,000 a year as a law enforcement officer. The people over in these countries that are doing law enforcement, they're not making even close to that.
Right.
They're making, 20% of that, and they're not bitching and complaining that they don't have a new patrol car or anything like that. Speaking of patrol cars, I sent you that picture of the patrol cars in Dubai. Ferraris and things like that. So,
is that a Ferrari? Or I thought it was a Lamborghini.
It was a Lamborghini, but they also had Ferraris. They had, it's crazy. And, we've got the slick top Ford LTDs over here, and now the Explorers and so forth, and some Dodge Chargers. But yeah, they've got high-end vehicles in Dubai as some of their patrol cars and everything. And the Middle East has a lot of poverty and so forth, but it has a lot of just ridiculous wealth, particularly in UAE.
Yeah.
But
not to go into a recruiting effort for DEA here, but you're talking about all these adventures that you could go on at DEA, which the opportunities are there. It kind of amazed me in DEA during my career that you would occasionally meet an agent that had stayed in one position in one city their whole career. And I'm thinking, how boring. But, you've got all these opportunities to go travel the world and somebody's paying for your trip. Why would you not take advantage of all the adventures that DEA has to offer? And I know it's still like that. Maybe not as much so when you and I were still on the job, but what a great place to work, I think.
Oh, I agree. And I like to stay in the mentorship game. I talk to a lot of people. They'll call me up and ask me about my career that are either in high school or college. And I'm like, I'll show them pictures of where I worked in the Middle East and places that I didn't even know existed before, like Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan. And these are countries that you don't even know about when you're in high school and college, unless you're taking some kind of history class. And what a great marketing tool. And to your point, I do sell some of these people that are talking to me about what they want to do with their career, and is DEA an option for them? Because I don't know where we are now, Steve, on that, but I know that we had 60 something country offices or offices in 60 cities across the world. I don't know if that's come down. I think our footprint is going to start coming down maybe a little bit, but still, all those opportunities to go out there and work is incredible.
They are, and I'm pulling up the DEA website here as we're talking.
Okay, and
find these things.
Okay, yeah, and I tell people, and it's different working in a country than it is visiting a country, right? You're not there
Absolutely.
as a tourist, and to me, you really get welcomed as part of their team. And I had to be immersed in Turkish language for 8 months, and I thought that's where all my hair went. I pulled all my hair out learning Turkish for 8 months, which is not true.
Because of daughters.
Yes, that's true too. Yes, and mine was going way before I took Turkish lessons. But you're immersed in that language and that culture, and when you get there, and I was told by the Turkish people that my pronunciation and my fluency in Turkish was not bad, but they just liked the fact that I was speaking their language in their country. I made the effort to do that. And that goes so far, and to this day, I still stay in contact with a lot of the people that worked with us and served with us in the Middle East via WhatsApp and so forth. And I want to stay in contact with them because they helped me in those 2 years I was there. They helped me get comfortable. They helped me get acclimated and things like that.
It was when we lived in Colombia between 91 and 94, my wife didn't get to go to the language school. So she picked Spanish up on her own. And it amazed me that she would go shopping by herself in Bogota. She would barter prices. She would, she'd buy me clothes and bring them, and I didn't like them, and she'd take them back and exchange them. And I'm like, how do you do that? You don't speak the language. Well, she'd look in the dictionary before she left and say she's going to look at shirts and pants and shoes or whatever it's going to be. Yeah. And she would get the words for that. And she went in with a smile on her face. She tried to use what little Spanish she had. She's willing to laugh at herself because they laugh. It's funny. It's funny watching somebody trying to speak your language when they don't know what the heck they're doing. But because she went with that open attitude, they would bend over backwards for her.
Yeah, no doubt. And she was making an effort to communicate and be a part of their culture and so forth, you know. And I'll tell you this, Steve, I don't know how it felt for you in the early 90s in Colombia. I can only imagine, but people always ask me, were you scared? It's so dangerous and so forth. And I used to tell them, hey, I was more afraid or had my radar on more walking down any street in the United States, in any big city, once the lights went down, than I was any part in the Middle East when I was there, and I don't know why, but, they don't tolerate the crimes that we tolerate here. Assault, robbery, domestic violence, things like that. And it's funny, people ask me, where were you most, like, it wasn't the hair on my head, but like, when was that time that the hair on your back or the hair on your neck stood up the most? And this always surprises people. And it was in Jerusalem. It was in Jerusalem.
Wow.
Because I was there with the Israeli National Police, and they were taking me through Old Town Jerusalem, the Church Holy Sepulchre, and all the, Golgotha and all the holy shrines, the Western Wall. And because I was there with them, therefore, the nefarious actors that were there knew that they must have been with somebody from the U.S. that they were protecting. And I didn't think about that at the time, but I had 3 or 4 Israeli National Police with me to go meet with their officials in Jerusalem and to take me on the sightseeing tours, right?
Right.
So, here I am, this dumb American, and I'm stopping at all the, the shops in Old Town Jerusalem, and they're like, Randy, we got to keep moving. I'm like, hold on, I want to look at this stuff. And they're like, Randy, people here know who we are, therefore they know who you are. And that the light bulb in my head went off when they said that.
So with everything going on over there, Randy, what were some of the things you were seeing as far as drug-related crimes? And did we still have an office in Afghanistan at that time, or had we already pulled out while you were there?
Oh, no. So I was there early 2018 and 2019, and then we still had our footprint in Afghanistan.
Okay.
And I tell you what, right now, a lot of the folks that we worked with in DEA and the U.S. government that were, born and raised in Afghanistan, they are some of the best patriots that I know. And what they've been dealing with for centuries, the people in Afghanistan, is crazy. The Soviet Union tried to invade them late 70s, and it just seems like century after century, everybody has tried to go over there and change things in that country to no avail. So the partnerships that we had with our folks in Afghanistan was awesome. We worked tightly with their narcotic interdiction unit, SIU, and so forth. And just incredible people that really cared about not only DEA's mission there, but U.S. mission as well. And, you hear when you talk about Afghanistan as it comes to drug-related threats and so forth, what's the first thing you think about? Heroin, opium, and so forth. And that's what everybody thinks about. But there is an alarming trend since we did remove our forces there. NATO forces left and so forth. When we pulled out of that country over 4 years ago now, all these troops left that were kicking doors in Kabul and the bigger towns and provinces in Afghanistan. There's no U.S. presence. There's no military or law enforcement presence. So I think a lot of the drug traffickers that were there already, whether they be Taliban, Al-Qaeda influenced, they're actually realizing, why am I going to go to the Taliban and grow poppy fields, have them tax me on their land, when we can just go into these factories and warehouses now that the U.S. government and allied forces are not kicking doors down in, and we can manufacture methamphetamine. And the first thing I showed people the pictures of some of the methamphetamine manufacturing going on in Afghanistan, and I go, where do you think this is? What part of the world do you think this is? And that's like, oh, it's either Mexico, United States or whatever. And they never think that it's Afghanistan, and rightfully so. But it just goes to show you that, the threat, the trends are always evolving. And, I got that information from some sources that worked with us in Afghanistan and in Pakistan. And that's why the importance of having a source network is incredible, particularly overseas, where you or I, Steve, are not going to walk into a marketplace and start doing undercover in any of those countries, right? So the source network overseas, particularly in that area, is very important. And, everybody, we didn't see when I was there, I would go to DEA headquarters. I would go to the lab in Quantico, and we'd sit down with them, and we're like, where is all that heroin going at that time, previous to the trend that's happening now? But is that heroin landing on U.S. soil? And DEA's lab's got an awesome, robust program where they can identify a lot of the drugs where they're being manufactured out of or cultivated based on soils and things like that, or common seizures and so forth. And it just wasn't making sense with us at that time. And again, this is 17, 18, 19. Like, where is that Afghan heroin going? Because again, that was the cat's meow at that time, and it always has been. So we would meet with DEA lab, and I guess at that time, HSI and CBP weren't reporting a lot of the seizures to DEA labs and so forth. So based on the intel that we got, and based on intel from the National Crime Agency in the UK and so forth, and our friends in Europe, that a lot of the heroin, a lot of the Afghan heroin was ending up in Europe and in Canada, but not crossing our border. Because for a while, Canada had a big heroin problem as well. And then now you fast forward to this methamphetamine manufacturing that's going on in Afghanistan. And, this too. It was only, and we saw traces of, we got some intel products and traces of what was happening in the Middle East when I was there in 18 and 19, that, Mexican cartels were working with the Iranian chemists and, some of the drug lords in Afghanistan and so forth to work together to work on getting products out of some of these source countries where this could happen. And, there's a reason why Iran chemists are getting recruited for, cartels in Mexico and other places like India as well. And, helping these drug trafficking organizations manufacture things that they never dabbled in before, like methamphetamine. And then, we're asking too, so where's this methamphetamine being, distributed to? And the sources I had that are very close to the ground there tell me that it's going to Iran. It's going to other countries in the Middle East. It's going to Russia. And, people are like, well, what are you worried about that for? It doesn't affect us. I go, directly, it may not, but indirectly it does. If it's going to Iran, it's going to Hezbollah and the other Iranian proxies that they have. It's going to Lebanon. It's going to the Russian mob to further, their mission to destroy our democracy and so forth. So, this as well. I always tell everybody, the enemy of the enemy is my friend.
Right.
And when it comes to drug trafficking, not just in our country, in Mexico and South American countries, it's all over the world. And, I hope that people are paying attention to India as well now. India, if you pull up their leading source for their economy, it's pharmaceuticals. And although India may not be, step by step with China as far as a lot of political issues and so forth, they're seeing what China's economy has done with fentanyl, with chemical facilitation, precursor chemicals and stuff like that. And I read something in one of the financial magazines a couple of years ago that by 2035, India was going to have one of the most robust economies in the world. So think about where that's coming from, And, I know that our offices in the Middle East and in New Delhi were helping provide intel for large tramadol seizures. And tramadol is an opioid that was used, that's primarily used in the Middle East and so forth. And, one of the largest tramadol seizures was off the coast of, was in the Mediterranean Sea. So, again, and who's on the Mediterranean Sea? Lebanon, Syria, all these ports, Turkish ports that are close to Iraq and so forth. So again, where are all these drugs that may not end up on U.S. soil? Where are they going, and whose hands are they getting into? And, I've always said this, and I think you'll agree with me. to include all the intelligence agencies out there. I believe DEA intel is phenomenal. I think our intel analysts are awesome. What they are able to do with the crime trends and so forth, what's new out there and things like that. And, fentanyl is a big deal right now, but what's that next big drug going to be, Steve? I don't know,
Yep. Yeah, you're exactly right. And it seems like it always starts on the West Coast and it makes its way east, no matter what it is, whether it's hash or meth or it just seems, I don't know what it is about that.
Yeah. And it's funny because I never, until I came to the West Coast, I didn't understand that. And then actually working on the West Coast, and particularly in California, you're right. All these trends start off in California or the West Coast somewhere, whether it be Oregon or something else, and they start working their way east. And getting back to the drug trafficking and manufacturing now that's going on in the Middle East that we weren't seeing before, it's financing the forest terrorist organizations that we've already known, but now it's going to be possibly financing those recently designated foreign terrorist organizations like the cartels that we've been working for decades now. And Absolutely. Going back to the comments that we talked about yesterday, it's like, it's time to start hitting these cartels, whether they be in South America, Central America, or Middle East, with what we usually do with these terrorist organizations. And that's like, you fight fire with fire.
So for the Afghani meth manufacturers, are they getting their chemicals from China?
From what we've seen, from what I've heard from those sources, it's actually, they're getting chemicals from Iran as well, and China. And like I said, that's, I'll never forget sitting in meetings at CENTCOM with admirals and generals, and they would tell me that if your offices can get cases into Russia, China, or Iran, you can have any military asset at our disposal, And
wow.
We didn't get cases into the Russian government or the Chinese government, but a lot of the Hezbollah and again, the Iranian proxies were laundering money in Nicosia, Cyprus, and the banks in Cyprus because they had very lenient, bank laws and so forth, and didn't have a strong money laundering, backing or laws on the table to combat that. So Hezbollah was often laundering their money through banks in Cyprus and so forth. And again, you've had them, with their influence in Lebanon and Syria as well. So the chemists that are helping the Afghans right now are actually coming out of the Middle East, like Iran, and some influence from Pakistan as well. And, again, Pakistan is in conflict with India, but when you have Pakistan and Afghanistan and some of the others in that area, it becomes even more clear and even more compounded that the enemy of the enemy is my friend. And again, there's these factories, they're manufacturing as well as in Pakistan as well. But it seems like, once we left Afghanistan and all our allies, it looked like Afghanistan was like, I tell people, for all the Star Wars fans out there, and I know, in my book, Steve, I can't keep track of all the numbers now, but the first Star Wars to me is the first one I saw in the movie theater back in the 70s. And they're all at the cantina, and Luke goes to find, somebody to fly him to rescue Princess Leia. And you have all these cast of characters that are in the cantina, and that's what Afghanistan is right now. You've got all these different cast of characters. You've got the Russian influence there now. You have all these different terrorist organizations. You've got, Al-Qaeda building back up their base as well. The Taliban's been there for centuries. With Osama bin Laden, we finally got him, and then Ayman al-Zawahiri recently, a couple of years ago. Now is a time to keep our foot on the pedal and really paying attention to what's going on in Afghanistan right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's amazing. You talked about that earlier, about, the Russians went in, all these different countries have gone into Afghanistan, and of course we come along and we think we're going to solve the problem that nobody else can solve, and it just turns into a cluster.
It does, and in the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to be interesting to see, because I tell everybody, we know the vacuum that was in Iraq once we removed Saddam Hussein from power. I mean, ISIS was created and all these subshoots of ISIS and so forth. I think Afghanistan is going to be a bigger vacuum because, again, of what you just said, the centuries-long conflicts there, the grabbing and pulling of the superpower like Russia that was there, that tried to overtake that land before and basically got their ass handed to them. And again, with the Iranians having some influences. And it's just going to be, it's going to be unfortunate, but it's going to be interesting to see what comes out of that place in the next half decade or decade. And I just hope all our intelligence agencies are paying attention to a place that we really had a lot of intel on. And unfortunately, I think a lot of that's gone now.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and by the way, I looked up on the DEA website, there's 91 offices in 68 different foreign countries. So you're hit the nail on the head there. Now, at the end of 2 years, so that was a 2-year assignment for you in Turkey, you decided to pull the pin and leave DEA. Why? What was the reasoning behind that for you?
Well, you know what? We talked about this earlier too. Like when I left to go to Turkey, it was we talked about it as a family that I would come back in 2 years, and I retired from DEA at 51. And you know this, and I know you left on great terms. I left on great terms. I left, I felt, at the pinnacle of my career. I never put my SCS package together. I think that 9 months as acting regional director was great. So I retired at 51, and I came back and was reunited with my family. And I dabbled into the private sector a little bit. I went to go work for a technology company that you're very well aware with, on the high side, classified side, and did some work with them. And I was actually an instructor for interview and interrogation. And then COVID hit. And then that pretty much shut down travel and so forth. So, and then, I didn't like teaching online. For me, I love to teach in person. And I like doing hands-on scenarios and so forth. That's hard to do online. So a position came open during COVID at the Northern California Regional Intelligence Center, which we're co-located with the HIDA. And it's a Homeland Security Fusion Center where we work, bring in all the different partner agencies, Homeland Security, FBI, all the state and local. And we work together on mitigating threats and identifying trends that are happening in our 15 county AOR.
Now, so do you have an enforcement arm there?
The enforcement arm I have sworn. I have 10, basically they're called threat liaison officers, and they're 10 local and state sworn officers, California Highway Patrol, San Francisco PD. And what we do is we train other law enforcement agencies on counter-terrorism, on identifying suspicious activity in their jurisdictions, in their neighborhoods, in their beats and so forth, and making sure that that information gets reported to law enforcement agencies. So we work hand in hand with the law enforcement community out there. I also have a cybersecurity team that does an outstanding job working with FBI and Homeland Security, and a critical infrastructure team, which identifies threats to things like the Golden Gate Bridge and, utility companies and so forth. And I also have a private sector outreach team that, again, one thing that really gets forgotten about on our war on combating drugs, that we talk about that war that really doesn't exist, or combating terrorism, is, that public sector aspect of it, the Fortune 500 companies, our private sector outreach team educates them on suspicious activity, and hey, there shouldn't be somebody at UPS dropping off a box and that's wearing a UPS uniform and walking away without signatures and so forth, when you have to sign for that, at that location. And So we do it. We educate people on just being aware of their circumstances around them and the situations around them. And, we're trying to prevent another 9/11. And as you know, there were several indicators of things that were out there that just nobody reported to. I mean, when somebody is asking for private flight lessons and all they care about are flying bigger planes, or asking, we just want to learn how to take off and not learn how to land. I mean, that should be a cue for someone to report this. And, in law enforcement, have we not done our job in reaching out to these people? And that goes back to the Santa Teresa airport example of getting out there and talking to these people that have information for us. And you never have to sign them up as a confidential source, Steve. You don't. You just have to talk to them and get out there and be engaging. And I hear, when I talk to people, I ask them, how many people in this room think that they're an introvert? And I'd say about maybe 15 to 20% raise their hands. And I'm like, well, if you're an introvert, if you think you're an introvert, then you never would be in this job right now, because you talked at your interview, you gave great examples of why they should hire you and so forth. And I know we did that in DEA. So I just really try to impress upon people to get out there and talk to these people that are not having that common or that daily interaction with law enforcement like they should be. And maybe that's on the law enforcement field, that we weren't out there soliciting information from these private pilot's license, instructors and so forth. So that's where to this day, I get a rise out of. I'll go pop in some of these places that I've gave examples. I'm like, hey, have you talked to anybody recently in law enforcement? And they're like, oh, they'll come by and they'll write a report or something, but they never come in and engage with me about what's going on. And I'm just trying to get that awareness out there. And that's what we do at the Northern California Regional Intelligence Center. And that's what we do with the other 79 fusion centers that are located throughout the country. Wow.
You're as busy now as you were when you were working for DEA, aren't you?
Yeah, and it's very gratifying. I go from drug enforcement, working in the Middle East, where that's where everybody thinks about terrorism, but a lot of times it's homegrown here,
Right.
And now I'm more so in the counter-terrorism world with being at the Fusion Center, but they all intertwine. And I tell everybody, and this, preaching to the choir, whenever you hit a warrant, whenever you hit a non-narcotic warrant, you're always going to find narcotics. Right. Always. It's intertwined in every single crime. Guns, terrorism, whatever. And people need to start thinking like that. And we need to be skilled on everything. And I love seeing these. There's a lot of local task forces now that are strictly human trafficking based. They're only working human trafficking cases. You have these ghost gun task forces. They're strictly working gun cases, and you still have the traditional drug enforcement task forces as well. So, and you see a lot of them now that are actually commingling and working together and sharing expertises, because again, ultimately, no matter what warrant you're hitting, there's going to be narcotics there.
Yeah. That it's interesting that you mentioned human trafficking. One of the things we're trying to do here on Game of Crimes is bring more awareness to what's going on out there. And you and I talked offline. I was in Vienna, Austria last week, and got to represent Libertas International, which is an organization in Medellin, Colombia, that helps to rescue victims of human trafficking and then offer support after they come out. And it's primarily child exploitation.
No doubt.
So I got to go to the United Nations over there and speak just briefly, but they also brought over 2 former victims. Mm-hmm. And these young girls, one was 17, I think the other was 18. They both prepared statements. The 17-year-old wasn't allowed to come to the 2-day meetings, but she could join online. And this kid is 17 years old, and she's taught herself English. She's taking online college-level classes to prepare her future. And the other one, she actually got up in front of everybody, and there's probably a couple hundred people there from all over the world. Plus, there was over 600 agencies or organizations that registered to participate in this. Most of them were online from around the world. and she's got the stones to stand up in front of this audience and read her personal statement. It's just so motivating. But and the whole, I'm not trying to go off topic here from your career, but that's one of the things that we want to do is promote the awareness of that. My little speech talked about how in narcotics, we are not in a position as a world to arrest our way out of the problem. We've got to come up with better plans, better solutions. I like to go back to the old saying, it takes a community to raise a child. Well, it's going to take a community to solve these problems. And the same holds true when it comes to human trafficking. There's so much money, billions and billions and billions of dollars, that we're not going to be able to arrest our way out of that problem either.
No doubt. And I want to back you up on that. Human trafficking is modern day slavery.
Exactly.
And to your point, listen to these victims talk. It's taken away the freedoms that we were born with, and we have in this country, completely taken away from people. And it doesn't matter where they came from. They're being smuggled into our country, and then they're being trafficked. And it's great to see here in California, and I bag on California a lot, but the one thing they are doing here, and they're doing it at an expert level, is these human trafficking task forces are making a huge dent in some of these organizations. And everybody thinks, they're coming across the border from Mexico and Central America and so forth. No, they're coming from China, Vietnam, the sex trafficking industry, not only in California, but throughout the country, the massage parlors and so forth. So, you're not stealing anything from my career, because that's actually what I'm helping promote right now. We have a 2-day human trafficking training at the NICRIC that we're hosting later in November. So I'm passionate about, I loved my career with DEA, but now I have this avenue and the stage being in the Fusion Center world where we can help really combat all these other crimes and trends that are going on as well.
I love it. I mean, here's ladies and gentlemen, here's another individual, just like all the other studs and studettes that I bring on here, who has dedicated their lives to serving their fellow man, including his wife as a police officer in Santa Rosa. So before we let you go here, Randy, I just want to give you an opportunity to give us your thoughts, your advice, whatever you want to call it, on those that might be considering a career in law enforcement or the military, a public responder, a first responder type career, or any other words of advice that you want to leave us with.
Oh man, how long do we have? No, I'll stay off my soapbox in a timely manner. But you know what, Steve, you brought up something too. Like I don't know about you, but there was nobody in my family, even extended family, that was in law enforcement. I sort of got this calling or motivation, when I was at the University of Alabama talking to the FBI agent and so forth, and being in the criminal justice program. My words of wisdom are to your listeners, and me and you and people in our profession, that we've moved on from this career. I'm thinking of the people that don't have those mentors in their life right now. The high school kids, the college kids that found a way to get to college without the help from their mom and dad, mm-hmm. or got lucky, and we're happy to, we're able to get a scholarship or whatever reason why they're there. They need to be mentored. They need to talk to the Steve Murphys in the world of why this job is so important to you and to everybody else. And I'm a big believer in mentorship. I take phone calls from kids I coached in youth football. Like I said, my youngest son is 20. I'm talking to 3 of his friends right now about who have an interest in law enforcement or the intelligence career. And, I teach at a police academy here locally, and I also get phone calls from students. I'm a wide open book. I give them my personal cell. I give them my email. Please reach out to me, because I didn't have that person to talk to in my family that was in law enforcement. And I want to be that sounding board for those that were like me growing up that didn't have law enforcement in their family. And, I go back we're not perfect. We're not perfect. This country's not perfect, but it's still the best thing that's out there.
Damn right.
And I didn't have to go live in the Middle East for 2 years to realize that. I knew that when I was in high school and college. We have it made here, and I don't like people to get complacent. And I challenge people. I've always said this, Steve. There's a lot of times people will throw out, we talked about social media earlier. They'll throw out, Throwback Thursday or go back to this time in 1998. This is me with a 20 kilo, whatever. It's like, but what are we doing now? What are we doing in the moment right now? What impact are we having right now? I don't care what you did 20 years ago or 30 years ago. What are you doing right now? And then I go one step further. And what are you doing that doesn't pay you? Are you getting out there and talking to your communities about the dangers of fentanyl? Are you training your communities on looking for suspicious activity around synagogues and churches and so forth? So I do. I take this as not a cross by any means, but it's a really good thing to continue on in life to carry, and it's your care for your community, and more importantly, the people that are in it. Make that impact on that next generation, because you brought it up before. They're not in the DEA academies like they used to be. They're slowly getting there here in California. I can't speak to the other states, but we got to get those butts back in the seats in these police academies and let them know the importance of that position. And not only that, but the importance of that position, but the integrity that you should have in that position as well.
Absolutely. I'm with you 100%, brother. In my opinion, there's no higher calling than anyone take up a position where they try to help their fellow man. It's a divine calling. So, brother, it's been an honor to have you on here, Randy. And thank you again to David Tyree for the introduction here. It's good to meet a fellow volunteer, although you're an Alabama fan.
No doubt. Hey, I spent time in Murfreesboro. Murfreesboro is a great city. So
it is. My sister, she passed away a few years ago, but she still lived there. She didn't want to go to West Virginia. She was it's like your brother. My sister was 8 years older than me. So when we moved, she was already an adult. She's like, nope, gonna stay right here. But ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to, you just heard an invitation to reach out to Randy if you're looking for information, if you're looking for somebody to educate you a little bit on DEA or law enforcement, or just good sound advice from an experienced mentor. You can find him on Facebook at Randy Wagner. You can also find him on LinkedIn at Randy Wagner, which is, for me, that's where I find a lot of people now. He's not on anything else, no other social media sites, but there's two for you. Don't be bashful. He gave you the opportunity. He gave you the invitation. So take advantage of things like that. I'm glad to hear that people are reaching out to you, Randy, because they reach out to me all the time, and it gets a little overwhelming at times. They will ask, can I ask you questions for a college or a high school? I've even answered questions for someone at junior high that was doing a paper on the Medellin cartel and drug trafficking. And it's got to the point now where we do Zoom calls and they can record them, because I just don't have the time anymore to sit down and answer that 3 pages of questions they want answered.
Yeah, but the fact, Steve, you're doing it, and that's the most important thing. And, feel free. I think I shared my Gmail account with you. I'm not going to share my NICRIC email because that is my work email, but please feel free. If anybody wants to reach out via email, please share that with them as well. And I always answer the emails.
And you're seeing, for our listeners, if you're watching this on YouTube, you're seeing sign up now showing Randy's email address. So there's your opportunity. Randy, again, thank you for taking the time to talk to us today, man. It's been, like I said, a true honor to have you on here. What you're continuing to do in life is admirable. You're setting a standard at a very high level, but that's also a standard for others to shoot for. For our listeners, thank you guys again for coming back every week. More great guests coming. Love bringing on these studs and studettes. People that you're not going to hear from, you're probably not going to hear from just about anywhere else. Again, if you're like to hear more, there's patreon.com/Game of Crimes, where you'll get early access to episodes before they come out for everybody else. We've got some things. I have a Q&A every month that you can ask me any questions. I haven't turned down a single question yet. We have a section called You Can't Make Us Crap Up about stupid criminals, just like the small town police blotters here. Critique a law enforcement movie or a crime drama movie every month. And we now have access, if you're at the upper two levels, on the 1st and 15th of the month, you have access to an interview, the most comprehensive interview that Javier Pena and I have ever given about the Medellin cartel and the takedown of Pablo Escobar and the making of the Narcos series. Back when I had a co-host, Morgan Wright was the MC of that. So there's 12 episodes of that out. You get that's included. Just come over, take a look, and see if you like it. If you don't like it, that's fine. Also, if you're not on YouTube, I'd appreciate you go over there, click on that subscribe button. Let's get that thing rolling. So, having said all that, not sure why you folks continue to come back to this episode or these episodes or this podcast, but you know why you come back. Because you enjoy playing the biggest, the baddest, the most dangerous game of all, and that's the game of crimes. God bless. Stay safe out there. We'll see you next week.